Okay.
Welcome to M2Techcast, a live internet radio show offering the latest news and interviews with the people driving business, technology, and politics in Michigan. Now, your hosts, Matt Roush and Mike Brennan.
Well, anyway, Mike Brennan. Matt is out today. He's dealing with some personal issues, so you're stuck with me, but I'll try to muddle through as best that I can. The show, again, is focused on COVID-19, how the Canadian government is handling it, how the Michigan state government is handling it, and then we'll conclude with Fred Brown, who'll be talking about how, in the United States anyway, things aren't looking good. The pandemic, the infection seems to be increasing, and well, whatever methods that states are taking aren't working very well right now. So let's start with Canadian Consul General Joe Comartin, who's calling in from Detroit. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing fine, Mike. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about what you folks in Canada have been doing. And so how has the Canadian government responded to the need for personal protective equipment and other essential materials for the COVID-19 response?
Well, we've done a number of things, Mike, in terms of ramping up our own production to get sufficient access to PPEs. We think we've pretty well got that stabilized, both in terms of what we're producing locally in Canada, domestically in Canada, but also the outreach that we've made to a number of other countries, the United States in particular, to provide sufficient supplies.
All right. And so how big is the industry? I mean, the Canadian response, you're like what we've done here in Michigan and across the states, where a lot of industries that don't traditionally produce PPEs, personal protective equipment for the healthcare industry, have pivoted into doing that. So what has been the Canadian industry's response on that?
It's been very, very similar to what it has been in the U.S. I'll play a bit of loyalty to my country and think we've done it pretty well, but clearly so has the United States. That pivoting that went on in a very short period of time was quite amazing. Any number of instances just in the local area, in the Windsor, Essex County area right here beside Detroit. A local distillery, for instance, has begun producing not alcohol, but sanitizers, which mostly they've been donating. A number of companies have been working specifically on ventilators. Others have been working on masks and shields. Ford Motor Company, for instance, locally has been producing for over 2 months now face shields, which have been used extensively, and quite frankly, a good deal of which has been donated.
All right. So you talked about what things are being made. Let's talk a little bit about were there really innovative products that have been developed to battle COVID-19?
Well, I think the ones that are probably the most interesting that we've been working on in conjunction, again, with some of the companies in the United States have been to move not entirely away from production of original masks, but to sterilize them. And a number of companies on both sides of the border have been doing this quite effectively. It's allowed us to move substantially up the number of masks that are available to our service providers. So that's been one interesting one. I think the other one that I would note is the material for some of these masks that are produced in British Columbia, a small company out there, within I think a few days of the pandemic hitting and them recognizing the greater demand we were going to have for this material to make the surgical masks. They ramped up their production. They doubled their production almost overnight. That's been very effective in meeting the demands on both sides of the border. And we are a big supplier of that material to the U.S. side.
Okay, so how are all these PPEs and whatnot, how are they being distributed? Did you hear me?
Well, Canada has the advantage of having a national healthcare program. Although it's administered province by province. We have 10 provinces and 3 territories. So it's administered through those. But the coordination that has gone on at the national level has provided real leadership. They've also been enabled by it being done nationally for us to do purchases on the international market that would have been very difficult for individual provinces to do. So that's the source of it. It has been coming, if it's coming from outside the country, has been coordinated at the national level with our federal Department of Health, and then distributed to the provinces on an as-need basis.
All right. So, what I know, the U.S. government has been doing some financial incentives and whatnot, doing other things to help industry do this pivot. What has the Canadian government done specifically to help industry produce PPEs, things like that?
Well, I think not so much looking directly at that, although again, we coordinated a number of efforts to make sure that companies were cooperating with each other. And in fact, a private group has gotten together with some support from the federal government to make the supplier of the material and the person who's actually building the product. We've been having, I think we've had over 1,000 relationships that have been built up during the last 3 months to make those, the efficiency of the operations to be as strong as we possibly can. So the government has certainly supported that. The government, and then in addition to that, beyond just the provisions they've made for companies working with health products, health items, have been providing large-scale support for wages, both directly to people who are out of work and to companies, so that we are, in effect, subsidizing wages for companies that are continuing to function during this period of time. And then in addition to that, there are very substantial direct loans or direct grants to corporations to the extent that they need in order to keep operating.
Kind of looking at the situation, why don't we go to that map, Dave, and show the map of Canada and talk about what's going on?
Yeah, so you can see there, yes, Mike, that the concentration is in our 2 largest provinces, both in terms of geography and in terms of population. We've had some serious discrepancies in the rate of the pandemic hitting, the virus hitting. It's been much lower percentage-wise on the East Coast and the West Coast, and actually through the center of the country and the prairies. The biggest concentration in terms of percentages and in terms of absolute numbers are in the 2 largest provinces of Ontario and Quebec. Quebec has unfortunately had the greatest number of fatalities, quite disproportionate to their population if you compare it with the rest of the country. But I think the point that we're now seeing is that we not only feel that we've plateaued that proverbial curve that we talk about, but we've actually turned it down. And we're seeing a substantial reduction in new cases, substantial reduction in fatalities. We do have some hot spots. One right here in the local area outside of Windsor. We have a large number of migrant farm workers who come in from Mexico and the Caribbean. That's an annual event to work in the agricultural sector. And we've had very high rates of incidence of them contracting the illness. Fortunately, so far, we've only had 3 deaths within that community, but it's one that we're very, very concerned about. On the other hand, we go across the country with very few exceptions. We've eliminated all the hot spots. And as I've said earlier, the numbers are dropping quite dramatically.
Yeah, it looks like the Yukon Territories is doing quite well, right?
Well, again, you've got a very small population up in the territories, right? But they are proud of the fact that they've had absolutely no cases. They've been very rigid about watching their own people and protecting them. Vast discouragement of letting people come into the territory has been one of the mechanisms they've used. as have a number of the other territories and provinces. But they've been the most successful by far.
Yes. Well, let's talk a little bit about the border crossing. As you know, some 400,000 people pre-pandemic were crossing the border on a daily basis. And then, obviously, the Prime Minister instituted some restrictions. I think the U.S. instituted some restrictions. Where does all that stand right now?
Well, the restrictions are mutual. We were very clear right from the beginning, and I know there were some negotiations that went on about them being even more severe than they are. But from the very beginning, we imposed restrictions that of nobody being able to cross, and then put in exemptions. The two most noticeable ones were for people providing medical services. We have a large number of people right at this border crossing who come from the Canadian side into the U.S. Health system, providing direct health care. So they were been allowed to continue with no restrictions. The other big area was to make sure that the shipping of goods, health goods in particular, were not imperiled, but the whole trucking industry, that proverbial supply chain that we talk about, has not been interfered with. It's worked very smoothly on an ongoing basis. Now, obviously, the numbers in that area are down dramatically, or were down dramatically. They're building back up as the auto industry and manufacturing opens up again. But while they were down, whatever product was needed, in fact, did move back and forth across the border. The only other thing that maybe differentiates between the Canadian and the American side is that earlier this month, our Prime Minister granted an additional exemption to allow families to reunify. Mike, you know this area quite well, so you know that there's lots of Canadians who are married to Americans on one side or other of the border, and vice versa, Americans who are married or living in a common law relationship on the other side of the border. So they've been allowed to now cross over when they weren't before, but they do have to self-isolate for 14 days.
Okay. We're almost out of time now. Are there any of these restrictions going to be changed at all in the near term here, or are they going to remain in place?
We've been negotiating with the United States on to renew these on a monthly basis. So it'll be coming up for renewal again in the 21st of July. It was just renewed on the 21st of June. I know there are negotiations going on to perhaps provide some additional exemptions, but none that are clear at this point. I think there's a general consensus that the exemptions at least are going to be renewed, but that the prohibitions and restrictions are going to continue on with maybe some minor modifications.
All right. That's Canadian Consul General Joe Crow-Martin. And thanks for much being on the show today. We appreciate it. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back with some folks from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation who are going to talk about the Arsenal of Innovation project. But for now, this is Mike Brennan, and you're watching M2Tech TV.
University is all about
Thanks, Joe.
opportunities.
We'll get
Okay,
your,
Mike, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
We'll get your, I'll get that MP4 file to you here later this week.
Be challenged. Be
Okay,
more.
great.
At
Thank you.
LTU,
Thank you.
possible
Have a good
is
day.
everything.
Take care of yourself.
Salaries
Okay.
of Lawrence Tech grads.
Hopefully you guys aren't in the same bedroom, right? I can't tell. So
Plan a campus visit to meet with counselors, faculty, and coaches. Why wait? Find out more at LTU.
how do I pronounce your name, Bobby?
As a Lawrence Technological University
How
graduate,
do I
you're
pronounce
not only
your name?
marketable,
Bobby
but you're-
Chasness.
Yes, more.
Chasness.
According to payscale.com, when it comes to graduate salaries, LTU is in America's top 100. Be invaluable. Be more. At LTU, possible is everything.
Salaries of Lawrence
Yeah,
Tech
normally we
grads
have
are
Matt
among
with
the
his wife in
highest
an auto
of any
accident this
university
morning,
in America. Plan a campus
He's
visit
okay.
to meet
Car
with
is totaled.
counselors, faculty, and coaches. Why wait? Find out more at ltu.edu.
Hey, it's Mike Brennan. We're back. Matt is out right now dealing with some personal issues, and we have calling in from, I think, the Lansing area, Bobby Kastnas, who's the director of the Pure Michigan Business Connect program, which we'll explain shortly, and Colin Dillon, who's going to be talking about, also from, is it MEDC? Is that who you work with, Colin?
Yeah. Both of the Pure Michigan Business Connect program are what we're both on, and that's within the Michigan Economic Development Corporation.
Got it. Okay. So you're going to be talking about something I just heard about last week, Michigan's Arsenal of Innovation plan. So who wants to kick it off? You want to talk about the arts? What do you want to talk about? Pure Michigan Connect. Probably should start with that because that's been around for a while, and now it's morphed into, or it was morphed into supplying PPEs and that sort of thing. So why don't we start with that, and then we'll go into the arsenal of innovation.
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to, and then I can kick it over to Colin to add any color that I missed. But so Pure Michigan Business Connect, it's the program that we both work on. It's been around since about 2011, and overall over the past several years, we've facilitated over $11 billion to suppliers in the state. Now, really what our program does is makes matches or hooks up the Michigan suppliers to global, international, and domestic demand. We are industry agnostic, so we work in pretty much every industry you can imagine, from agriculture, automotive, aerospace, even fashion industry, and we look to uncover the demand that our suppliers here in the state can fulfill. So really ultimately looking to increase Michigan business. Like I said, from this COVID response, immediately after, we received some of the news that, we'd be looking to manufacture PPE, our program had kind of enlisted or developed a platform to help the suppliers and the buyers of PPE kind of get connected with each other. So Colin on the team has been pretty instrumental in developing kind of that platform, which is completely free to access for all of our Michigan companies. But what it does is really intake some of the questions for the supply side and then match that up for the demand side that we have regarding PPE. Now, really quickly, I guess bouncing right into arsenal of innovation is what we've looked to do with primarily a marketing campaign, but with obviously the outbreak of COVID-19 and, everything going on and kind of the large shortage of PPE, not only in our area, but globally, what we've done is, really just had an incredible response to the emergency to be able to take some of those smaller or medium manufacturers, even all the way up to the tier 1s and tier 2s, and the big 3 automotive suppliers. But what we've been able to do is kind of pivot their ability to produce PPE or other forms of protective equipment to be able to kind of supply that in a kind of a non-traditional aspect for companies not only in the state but out of state looking to get back to work. So, Colin, I don't know if I missed anything or that you wanted to mention.
Well, I think, so Pure Michigan Business Connect, I think, is a primary example of what this arsenal of innovation idea really is. And that's, our program leading up to COVID, like a lot of program, states here in the U.S., it wasn't something that medical technology, PPE, things like that weren't things that our program had done a lot of. We hadn't really focused on that. We've done some stuff with Med Health throughout the years, but the PPE stuff was something that came along very quickly, and our program being as flexible as it is, I think highlights some of the programming that you'll see from the MEDC over the coming years, as far as programming that's a little bit more flexible to respond to needs that come up, particularly as we emerge out of the economic downturn that has been caused by the virus. But real quick, I can just highlight some of the things that we've focused on for the program. So right now, the Pure Michigan Business Connect program has an online business-to-business connection platform where both suppliers and buyers can connect effectively. And the way that looks is, if your business needs PPE items, and that can be everything from masks and face shields and gloves, things like that, all the way up to ventilators, powered respiratory devices, things like that, as well as non-traditional PPE stuff like the temporary walls and dividers, maybe some spray systems for sanitizers, things like that companies are still going to need to respond, particularly as we're reopened. And we're not just dealing with the physical items, but as people are back in manufacturing facilities or offices or grocery stores or retail stores or whatever it may be, things that you need to make sure that your employees and customers and everything are safe. there's also stuff there. So you can log into the demand form and input there what it is that you need. It's pretty straightforward. There's I think about close to 24 choices that you can make for PPE stuff. It's a short form, shouldn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes to fill out. And then from there, once you've completed that, you'll have access to the supplier list that we have available for each one of those specific items. And the suppliers work very much the same way. So if you're a company that supplies PPE items or PPE adjacent items, other safety products, what you can do is you can log on, same website, and we'll make sure that we distribute links. Mike, whichever way is the easiest way for us to do that following this.
You can give them right now if you want, and then we'll in the edit I'll actually add those.
Okay. So the site is michiganbusiness.org /PPE, or I'm sorry, hold on. Let me make sure I get it correct here. So it's pmbc.connect.space/COVID-19/forms. So that's PMBC as in Pure Michigan Business Connect.connect.space/COVID-19/forms.
Okay.
So suppliers can go in there and say, hey, yes, we can supply these products. There's a manufacturing, if you manufacture the products or if you just have them. And then once we get that information, there's maybe some follow-up questions that we'll ask just to make sure that we're distributing all the right information. But the buyers will all have access to the supplier list, and from there they can reach out to the suppliers directly as a way of hopefully making the communication process between demand and supply as efficient as possible. So far, we've had a little more than 3,400 demand requests come through the platform. We got a big bump when the governor mentioned us in a press conference about a month ago and highlighted the platform as well as some additional marketing that the MEDC has done to promote the platform. It's open, like Bobby said, it's completely free of charge for companies to submit either their demand or their needs. They'll obviously need to procure the items from the businesses that are listed, but we've got about, I think, latest count, about 260, maybe 270 supplier companies from Michigan on the list. When purchasers download the list, there's a matrix at the beginning of the workbook. It's an Excel workbook that you can download that has all of the suppliers listed. It has their locations, and then for each of the PPE items, it has just an X in a box. And so you can see if a company offers multiple things. We know that oftentimes companies need multiple things, and so it's helpful to know, all right, I can reach out to this company and they can hopefully help me out with everything that I need to find. Otherwise, you can easily see, and then you can cross-reference the contact information in the additional tabs. And really, that's from the PMBC perspective as far as how the platform works. I think that's pretty straightforward, and it's what we've been able to determine is the most efficient way of doing this. Ideally, the way that our program works on a non-COVID basis, when we're doing our traditional matchmaking, is a little bit more personalized and a little bit more concierge as far as making sure that we're making direct connections to hopefully get conversations started for procurement as quickly as possible. Given the amount of demand that we've seen for this, though, and knowing that that's still going on, and us wanting to make sure that we get information in front of businesses as quickly as possible, this is what we've settled on. Obviously, if anyone has any questions, they can send me an email is the easiest way. My email address is Dillon, DILLON, C in the numeral 1 @michigan.org. And if you have any questions about the platform and getting a form submitted or anything on our website, we can get those questions answered for you. But I think that the thing, to kind of segue into what Bobby and I, or what Bobby can talk about, and I can certainly chime in on this. I think that one of the things that has made Michigan so adept at handling this crisis, and something that has been valuable for Michigan businesses as far as how they've been able to respond, is we have a lot of manufacturers in the state that have switched over production or added production of PPE to their portfolios. That's been incredibly valuable for us to make sure that we're able to recommend a constant stream of businesses, and hopefully people have found that to be helpful. But I think it highlights really the flexibility and strength of Michigan's manufacturing industry, not just for the things that people may think of as far as automotive and maybe aerospace and tool and die and some other things like that. But a lot of the manufacturers can play in multiple industries and have the talent and the ability to identify opportunities, quickly transition into those, and then make an impact. And I think that the arsenal of innovation programming, and highlighting that the MEDC is looking to do, focuses a lot on that. And so there's numerous success stories that we can maybe point stuff to about how that has happened throughout this. But as the MEDC evolves into the post-COVID, as much as we can be in that right now, the post-COVID operating environment where businesses are back open, albeit maybe at reduced in-person or overall staff levels. But the ways that companies have begun to think through, all right, this is how we're going to respond, and what we're doing to make sure that we're supporting that.
We actually are out of time, so we don't give Bobby much time here to follow up. But is there anything you want to add to that, Bobby?
Just finally, just how proud I am of most of these manufacturers being able to pivot so quickly, from distilleries to even Petoskey Plastics, making isolation gowns. I think it really is a great highlight to say, Michigan is not only automotive, and we are able to develop the engineering base to produce really anything in the state. So.
All right, and we'll be sure to post that address again for where folks can find PPEs, or if they want to supply PPEs, we'll get all that labeled when we do the post-production on this. So thanks, guys, for being on the show today, but right now we need to go to commercial break. LTU's paying the bills, and then we'll be right back with our infectious disease expert, Fred Brown. But this is Mike Brennan, and you're watching MI Tech News TV.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
What do you get at Lawrence Technological University?
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Welcome to stay in the waiting room if you want to listen to what Fred says. He's got some scary things to say. It's not looking good out there.
I actually, if I can, I'm going to hop off because I got to return a couple of calls. But
okay,
I'll be sure to check out the link afterwards.
Absolutely. All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Mike.
All right, find out more at ltu.edu.
Lawrence Technological University graduates earn a degree and a higher starting salary. In fact, when it comes to earning potential, the Brookings Institution ranks LTU 5th among U.S. colleges and universities. Be enriched. Be more. At LTU, possible is everything.
Salaries of Lawrence Tech grads are among
it
the
shows he's still connecting to audio, so I'm going to give it another run.
Plan a campus visit to meet with counselors, faculty, and coaches. Why wait? Find out more at ltu.edu.
As a Lawrence Technological University graduate, you're not only marketable, you're worth more. Yes, more. According to Payscale.com, when it comes to graduate salaries, LTU is in America's top 100. Be invaluable. Be more. At LTU, possible is everything.
Salaries of Lawrence Tech grads are among the highest of any university in America. Plan a campus visit to meet with counselors, faculty, and coaches. Why wait? Find out more at ltu.edu.
All right, we're back, and Matt is out dealing with some personal issues, and I think Fred's calling in from the car. It's one of those shows. Are you there, Fred Brown? Uh-oh. Do we have Fred?
It's showing him dropping and reconnecting to audio off and on. I don't think he's got a good connection.
He's driving. Fred, are you with us? Okay. Boy. There's one possibility, Dave. I don't know. Is there another show right after mine?
No.
Here's another possibility. He said he'd be home around 2:45. We could just stop doing live now, wait for him to get home, and pick it up from there if that's okay with you.
Yeah, totally fine.
All right, let's do that, because otherwise it's just you and I chatting, and
Right.